toxic masculinity.
Rhode Island to ban critical race theory. Well, this is a surprise. Now, I didn't actually have a chance to read this, so this is going to be new for me, just like it is for you. But I think that Rhode Island is a left-wing state, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go ahead and look that up, actually, real quick. Rhode Island presidential election results. Let's see here. Yeah, they voted for Joe Biden by a lot. He won by 60% in Rhode Island. So this is a far left state. I should have had that memorized. That's a pretty easy one, actually. But let's go ahead and have a look at this story. This is again from the Daily Caller. Don't need this frame here. Okay. A group of GOP state representatives. Let's see here. I think that photo is actually of Lincoln in Portland, Oregon, but maybe not. Maybe that's in Rhode Island. Okay, let's see here. A group of GOP state representatives in Rhode Island introduced a bill to the General Assembly that would prohibit teaching divisive concepts. Okay, so this is just the GOP in Rhode Island. This may not actually go through then. The H.6070 bill introduced this week, introduced into the state's House in early March, seeks to prohibit the teaching of divisive concepts and would mandate, I don't know why I can't read today, guys, and would mandate that any contract, grant, or training program entered into by the state or any municipality include provisions prohibiting teaching divisive concepts and prohibiting making any individual feel discomfort, guilty, anguish, or any distress on account of their race or sex. All right. Let's see. Additionally, the bill offers 10 definitions of what should qualify as a divisive concept banned from public education. Yeah. I'm always a little bit hesitant when it comes to banning speech. I don't think speech should be banned. But in the case of critical race theory, oh, hello. I didn't mean to do that. Something has to be done, but I don't know about banning. Let's see here. Christopher Rufo writes, breaking, Rhode Island has introduced legislation to ban critical race theory training programs. The bill would prohibit public institutions from promoting race essentialism, collective guilt, and neo-segregation. Let's go, Rhode Island. I don't know if I'm as happy about it as other conservatives. Let's hear. Concepts deemed controversial enough to consist banning include assertions that any individual by virtue of their race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously, or individuals should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of their race or sex, according to the document. The Rhode Island House Committee on Education will debate Wednesday on the bill, NBC 10 reported. Introduction of the proposed legislation comes days after Providence Mayor George Alorza unveiled the findings of a study that reportedly shed light on separate but unequal existence of blacks, indigenous, and people of color communities in the state. The number of city leaders involved in the study have already spoken out against the bill. Reconciliation and the resulting reparations really is for everyone's benefit. Reparations is for everyone's benefit. If we don't call out our history and understand it, history will have shown that we'll repeat it and have repeated some of these wrongs for too long. All right. But, here's the funny thing about the separate but unequal thing. It doesn't tend to be white people or Republicans who are demanding that people be separated. It tends to be leftists and people of color, or specifically black people, tend to want to be separated, right? We've reported in the past on, I think it's Columbia University in New York, has all of these like segregated graduation ceremonies. I mean, so the idea used to be that we were a melting pot, right? That everybody could come to America and, they could all have the American dream. They could all, take advantage of the generosity of the American system and how, how much equality that there is here and how much opportunity that there is here. But the one thing that was expected of everybody is that they would melt into the country. That is, they would a little bit of the essence of their own personality, their own culture would be absorbed into the country, but for the most part, they would assimilate into the culture of the country that they were moving into, right? This is the natural course of, what you do. If you respect a place and you like it and you want to go there, the assumption is that you're going to want to embrace the culture that they have there. Now, Democrats, so we kind of effectively were able to do this in a way where people weren't being ridiculed, or there wasn't a lot of racism against immigrants that were coming here. In like I said, I've always said, like the 80s and 90s, we had gotten, I think, to about the pinnacle of that. And then for whatever reason, Democrats said that's not enough. We get a lot of power, we get a lot of prestige from pointing at Republicans and saying that they're racist, and we can't do that anymore because the Republicans aren't being racist. So what are we going to do? Well, we'll say that it's not enough to accept people for their race. We also have to accept their culture, and their culture, we have to say, is better than our culture, and therefore people should retain their own culture. So it's no longer a melting pot. They started to say it's a salad bowl, right? And they started pushing this idea of multiculturalism. Not only do we have a multiracial country, we now have a multicultural country where you don't have to just be an American in the sense that you embrace American culture, but you can also be, you can come from Africa and retain your tribal culture. You can come from Mexico and retain your Mexican culture. You can come from China and retain your Chinese culture, and all live together in harmony in America. No, you have to embrace to some degree American culture, because if you come here from, say, Saudi Arabia, where they have this culture of like stoning gays to death and throwing them off rooftops and stuff like that, and you say that's the culture that I want to retain. I want to retain a culture in which you murder people that you think brought shame upon your family. That's not going to work here in America, right? To some degree, you have to embrace American culture, American values, American laws. That's how we work as a country. In the UK, they took on this same idea of multiculturalism. Oh, we're going to let people embrace their own culture, and we don't want to force our own culture on them and all this kind of stuff. And then what they ended up having was like a couple of decades, I think it was like a few decades, of women being kidnapped. Well, sometimes kidnapped, sometimes coerced by these mostly Pakistani gangs, and they were forced into prostitution. They were, raped by many men, sometimes hundreds of men, and these women were always, or almost always, white women. They would target white women. These Pakistani gangs would target white women, and they would commit all these sex crimes against them. And this was happening for a very long time. And police officers knew about this. The police knew about it, but they didn't want to be called racist, so they didn't say anything about it because of multiculturalism. Well, it's just their culture. And this was tragic. And you can look into it, right? They're called grooming gangs in the UK. And this happened to thousands of British women. Thousands of British women. Well, not British women, girls. Girls like as young as like 12 years old. Thousands of them, thousands and thousands. And so this is what happens when you say you can come to America or you can come to the UK in that instance. You don't have to embrace our culture. You can do whatever you want here because your culture, we respect your culture, and you take a hands-off approach and you say we're going to be passive about this. We're going to let you do whatever you want. No. You come to America, you've got to become an American. This is why illegal immigration is so terrible. You can't just let whoever wants to come here come in and do whatever they want. Or you've got to like vet these people and make sure that they're somewhat decent. You can't just let in everybody because you feel guilty because you're a white person. You have white privilege or whatever you think you have. The problem is that you have these rich leftist white people who feel guilty about being rich. I think that's what it is. And they associate their wealth with being white, which they shouldn't do because there's wealthy people of every race. And they say, well, we're so lucky because we're born white and we have all this great, awesome stuff. And we're so rich and it's so great being white and so great being rich. And, we should just like make it so that black people can be rich too. Even though, they forget the fact there are tons of black people. If you go to Beverly Hills, pretty much everybody driving a Bentley is black, but whatever. So they have this guilt. They have this idea, oh, I feel guilty. I'm gonna do some nice things for these people of other cultures. Let's open the borders and let them in and let them experience the wealth of America. So they let everybody in. But it's not their kids getting raped. It's the poor kids in the same neighborhood that live kind of like in the same neighborhoods as these immigrants. They're the ones that get screwed over, right? It's the poor people who are trying to get a job at, whatever they can, and that job is taken by an illegal immigrant who can work that job for half the price because they're not subject to the same regulations as an American citizen. The same laws, really. You're illegal. You're not subject to laws in America in the same way that you are if, I got in an accident when I was really young. I got in an accident, and the guy was an illegal immigrant, and he didn't have a license. He didn't even have a license. And so, I was really young. I think I was 16. I was first driving. And, they just kind of disappeared, and the insurance company couldn't do anything about it. And so, I got charged for everything. It was all my fault. It was on the record. Even though it wasn't my fault, the accident wasn't my fault. And I basically got screwed because this illegal immigrant had hit me. And this kind of stuff happens all the time where it's an illegal immigrant, so they're not subject to the laws in quite the same way. And sometimes they run into people and kill them, and all kinds of bad stuff happens. But, they can just kind of slip through the system because there's no real records of them. And illegal immigration is a terrible thing. People don't realize how bad it is. We know what's going on at the border with all the rapes of all the girls. 80% of girls that try to cross the border are raped. Anyway, I'm getting kind of lost on a tangent here. But, we were originally talking about critical race theory. And let me try to just forget what I was saying. Let's get back to this. I don't know if you should be able to ban critical race theory. In terms of in government, like banning it as something that's taught in government, I can understand that, or public schools, I can understand that. But I don't think people should be banned with any kind of speech, even though I'm totally against critical race theory. I think it's terrible. I think it's wrong. You can't ban stuff like that. So I don't know if that bill's going to go through. I do think that there are ways that we should be able to fight against this, and I think that the primary way is just to talk about it in the media. We have a huge problem in America right now with media. They're just so bought into the leftist idea. All right, enough tangents, enough talking about critical race theory. We all know that it's divisive. Basically, they say white people are evil, white people are terrible. Let's move on to the next story. All right, so the next story is AP staff. Okay, so the Associated Press is telling their staff not to call the border crisis a crisis. Now, you'll remember that the Associated Press was the same organization that recently did the polling that indicated that toxic masculinity, weekdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.